So Mary, why don't you introduce yourself so we can have an idea of your experience and what you're going to talk about?
So many thanks, Guillaume, for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to you all today. It's great to be able to exchange with regional media organizations in Europe, as you all play a crucial role in the delivery of information and the trust that the audiences are actually putting in this information. So I'm really interested also in what you're thinking. I was asked by Guillaume to tell you more about our collaborative journalism project in particular, and the way we tackled online mis and disinformation through these projects with First Draft. So a brief introduction about First Draft to start with who we are and what we do. So as written on this slide, at First Draft, we work to empower people with the knowledge, understanding, and tools needed to build resilience against harmful, false, and misleading information in the moments that matters. We are also born from an informal global network of media organizations, tech companies, and academics, all preoccupied with the growing online information disorder since 2015, 2016, the impact it has on crucial moments such as democratic elections, and the ideas and the techniques to fight it. So as I was telling you before, we are taking actions in 3 different ways, by the initiation of collaborative initiatives of journalism, as we will see more in detail today, by research and the design of a theoretical framework to better understand and tackle information disorder, by training, especially for media organizations and journalists around this theoretical framework, but also tips and tools to investigate the online information ecosystem, to verify and monitor it, but also to question the ethics and standards of online investigations, especially when it comes to social networks and messaging apps, for example. We're also doing training and conversations around vicarious trauma and online protection for all the people who are doing online investigations, because that's also a very important matter to us. Short introduction about me as well. My name is Marie Bohner. I did coordinate the project that we did around the French presidential election in 2017 with around 30 French, UK, and Belgium media organizations and academics. Since the beginning of the pandemic and the related infodemic, we are working on a more sustainable and global community of media organizations coming together to identify mis and disinformation narratives around health, especially around coronavirus. So I'll get back to that later in the presentation. I wanted to start by giving you a quick overview of the framework that is at the foundation of our work, the concept of information disorder. This theoretical framework has been designed by our US director, Claire Wardle, who is also a researcher and a global expert in mis and disinformation. It is the basis for all of our projects, from collaborative journalism initiatives to training. It gives us the basis to trigger the conversations on information disorder and be clear on what we are talking about and why we are tackling it. There is a general tendency, for example, to use the term fake news, as I was saying to Guillaume before this webinar. This is a term that we all use to vaguely define all types of information disorders. This is something we are trying to fight against, as it only brings, in our opinion, more confusion and fuel to the fire. This term of fake news is often used by politicians themselves to attack media organizations and journalists, creating more distrust. It is also often used to talk about content that actually has nothing to do with news in the first place. So in a general way, it is not helpful. Claire Wardle defined the concept of information disorder, proposing 3 definitions that can help to better understand the sources and the messages of online misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Because it's helpful when we investigate it to make the difference between a false content that is shared intentionally and another one that is not. We have a guide that is in English for now on our website, but that has been translated in 7 other languages, Italian, German, French, Spanish, for example, and that would be online very soon with all the definitions linked to these concepts. So in the same guide, we also have a way to get into more granularity when we are talking about mis and disinformation. Claire Wardle defines 7 types, which are going all the way down from satire and parody, as you can see, to fabricated content. So parody, for example, can sometimes be deceiving when the humoristic aspect is not understood, and it's used a lot by bad actors at the moment to circulate mis and disinformation online. Fabricated content can be also created to spread inflammatory claims, sorry. So online investigations need tools and techniques, and sometimes it also needs a lot of time. These resources are shared unequally from one newsroom to another, as you perfectly know. But situations like the coronavirus crisis remind us that misinformation has a real impact on people's lives and health. Verification is another basic of journalism, but online investigation and the importance of social networks and messaging apps as content and information sources make fact-checking, debunking, and pre-bunking essential nowadays. At the end of the day, it's also a matter of trust and credibility. Explaining your investigation steps in a transparent way can truly help, as we saw in previous projects, to gain your audience's trust. Guillaume asked me to tell you a bit more about our collaborative journalism initiatives. I would say that the fact that you are a European network of media organizations is an interesting basis to this conversation, and I would be interested to hear from you what you are using, if you are using this network in terms of mutualization of tools and techniques or of contents of investigations, for example. So we have run several collaborative journalism initiatives since 2017 in various countries around the world, from Brazil to Nigeria and France to Uruguay. Most of these projects have been organized around election campaigns, as these are crucial moments for our democracies, but also for the circulation of information, and especially accurate information, which is also a right, as you know. CrossCheck France, for example, was one of the first initiatives of that kind. It took place during the campaign of the presidential election in 2017. This project has lasted for 2 very heated months, uniting 37 partners from France, Belgium, and the UK, mostly media organizations, but also academics and tech partners, and also students who played a very important role. The idea was not to fact-check the claims of the candidates, but to dive into social listening and monitoring of the social media platforms, looking for rumors that had a link to the themes of the campaign. The media organizations discussed the story to cover, but also went through the verification steps and then cross-checked their work before publishing. We had big national outlets, as well as small local media and pure player media, which helped us to reach out to various audiences in a way that was felt, in a research that we did afterwards, as less biased and more transparent, thus more educational. Comprova was initiated around the presidential election in Brazil in 2018. It has continued since through different variations of the project and is now in its 4th phase. The project gathers now 24 Brazilian newsrooms and is coordinated by ABRAGE, the Brazilian Association for Investigative Journalism. The Comprova project has worked in a similar way to CrossCheck France, with a specific focus developed on WhatsApp as a field of investigation in terms of misinformation, but also a way to get in touch with audiences via a tip line with the broader public, could share suspicious content to investigate. A research conducted on a representative sample of the Brazilian population has shown that the 2018 Comprova project did reach out to 1 Brazilian users into 4. We have conducted research on these 2 projects to be able to reflect on them and build on their findings for the future. So our key learnings from these 2 initiatives, as well as from the other ones, are following. First of all, there is a real efficiency in the production of verifications by the avoidance of duplications when we are working in collaboration. It is saving precious time and resources. It also helps to have several pairs of eyes on the same investigations to avoid biases and major mistakes. It thus brought more credibility to the conclusions of the investigations during the project. Collaboration also offered some heated conversations about journalism choices and practices, which were seen as a real space for peer exchange from the participating journalists. One of the major pitfalls was to maintain this collaborative will out of critical moments such as election times. These projects were extremely time-consuming for us as well as for the involved newsrooms. The research we did after the project in France and Brazil showed us that the collaborative initiatives helped to reach out to more diverse audiences, as I was saying before, because of the transparency of the investigation steps that were explained clearly in each of the publications we did, but also because of the presence of regional and local newsrooms, which were sometimes considered as closer to the audiences and thus less partisan. Last but not least, we believe that fact checks are important, but that the data voids they are highlighting and the misinformation narratives circulating from one country to the next are even more essential in the fight against information disorder. We have seen, especially around COVID-19, how mis and disinformation narratives actually circulate from one country and one language to the next. I don't know if that's something that you have seen as well. But we have seen many times in Europe how the same message could circulate actually from the US to the UK to Italy to Romania and going through Spain and Germany. So it's really important to also have this collaboration around these messages. So it is to avoid the lack of sustainability of critical moments-based projects that we are now experimenting the building of a global community of media organizations to tackle information disorder. And whatever size the media organizations have is good for us in a sense that we want really to have a variety and diversity of media organizations there. We are keeping the name CrossCheck for this community, as well as for the platform we are about to launch to host this community. The coronavirus crisis gave us a reason to start gathering various former media partners, but also new ones like Journalistes Solidaires from around the world to share insights and ask questions. We are also sharing the results of our own monitoring of various regions of the world, as my colleague Ali, for example, does for India on this slide. For the moment, this community of around 180 journalists from around the world is hosted on Slack channels, but we will very soon move to a new end-to-end investigation and publication platform. CrossCheck is a fully integrated workflow and publishing platform for journalists, researchers, and topic specialists to collaboratively disrupt disinformation and promote accurate, trustworthy reporting. It will take the shape of a safe social network, but also a working space to store and share ideas and contents in various formats. The platform will provide the capacity to work in open or closed groups with your own team or other members of the networks that you can choose. It is built in a way to give you the credit you deserve for your contributions to collaborative investigations, but also for you to approve and thus reinforce the credibility of investigations done by other parties. Collaborative investigations will be publicly visible, and we also expect to create interactions with the broader public through tip lines. We will also contribute to the community by sharing training, updates, and practical tips for online investigations. We also hope to open the platform and the network to experts and specialists such as academics and non-partisan, non-profit organizations to allow them to contribute evidence and knowledge to the investigations. This new platform is about to launch, and we want to welcome you to apply to join us as soon as it will be online. Kindly let me know if you want me to come back to your newsroom for more detail in the upcoming weeks, or if you want any other information about that. So I also wanted to share with you an overview of the kind of free and available resources we produce to support the work of journalists around misinformation in general. Some of these resources are now available in 7 different languages. Others are being translated and will be online very soon. So first of all, I can invite you to subscribe to our daily and weekly newsletter, where our brilliant editorial team is curating some of the most noticeable information in terms of analysis of misinformation trends and tactics and information disorder in general. So we also created a whole resource hub for reporters covering coronavirus, including training resources, articles, webinars, updates on the platform responses to the infodemic, etc. So this is all available and free of charge on our website. And for the webinars, we have some of them which are available in 7 languages, which we produced directly in several languages. Our online course for reporters covering coronavirus. So it is in 7 languages and thought in bite size to be easy to navigate. So if you're not interested in verification because you know that already, but you just want to look at the monitoring and social listening part, it's possible. You don't have to go through the whole course. And it gives you some really practical tips to work on. It also gives you some elements of understanding and the main misinformation trends around coronavirus, how to protect yourself and your sources online, and the list of reliable information sources. We have a toolbox that we update all the time, which is probably the real quality of it, because you can always find the tools that are new, reliable, and free to use. You can find Invid there, which is one of the tools that Denis will describe afterwards. Last but not least, for those who are interested in the US upcoming elections, as well as in new educational formats, we created a free 2 weeks text course to prepare, which is available on phones and on WhatsApp, to prepare for the mis and disinformation trends which will hit this major event in the US. So it is in English and focused on the US for now, but we are seriously looking at having a global version of it with examples of misinformation and disinformation trends from around the world. So if that's something of interest, let me know as well. And many thanks for your time. I hope I have not been too long. I hope that this presentation has given you some ideas on how to contact us and how we can support you and your newsroom. And I look forward to your questions. And if you have any questions, you can contact me at partner@firstdraftnews.com. And that's it.
And how much is it? That's something you should specify.
How much is what?
Your service, working with you.
Well, as I said, all the resources that are online, for example, are free, free to use. For the access to the CrossCheck platform, it's probably, we are thinking about it at the moment. It's probably going to be a paid access, but I can't tell you exactly how much it is for now. Normally, for sure, we will have variations of the prices depending on the size of the newsroom, of course, and also probably for the people who were our former partners in former projects. Yeah, and in terms of training, I think that the idea is that we can do some customized training for the different newsrooms. In which case, if we have to add extra work to customize it to the various newsrooms, then we have to put a budget behind it. But we will also do some training generally for the CrossCheck community that will be free to access. So yeah.
Yeah, so my question was half real, half jokingly asked, because obviously there's a tremendous amount of resource and a really useful resource to go through on the various links we've posted in the chat of that Zoom call. And it's also one of the reasons why we did not focus in that webinar onto beginners how to fact check something, because there's so much things available that it felt much more interesting to talk about the possible collaborations ahead of us, because there's a lot of material you can already find and we can point you at on the basic training, which maybe wasn't worthy of your time today. Thank you very much, Mari, for that presentation. Do you guys have any questions for Mari? I maybe have a question, and we are welcoming Denis at the same time, who's going to do the next presentation about INVID. I have a question, which is, you said that collaboration was beneficial and sometimes a bit hard because you wouldn't agree on standards. Would you require members to share a set of standards and maybe sign a charter before they can work with you? What was your process in that acceptance of new members within specific projects?
So I think that we did not have, I don't recall, for example, for CrossCheck France, I don't recall, but maybe Denis will remember that we had a specific standard charter. We had a community guidelines of how to interact with each other on the Slack channels, for example, which we have already nowadays. We don't have a charter in itself in terms of standards, but the question is more that we are counting on the peer-to-peer conversations, for example, to discuss the tipping point. If we're talking about fact checks, for example, sometimes you will find something that is something that looks like a crazy conspiracy theory that you might see on a very specific Facebook group with 3 people on the group. And we really believe that it's not because something is producing disinformation online that you should always cover it, for example, because sometimes it's actually adding, amplifying the disinformation or the misinformation itself when you give it your voice, even if it's to debunk it or to say, oh, it's false that this and that happened. Actually, the very fact that you are mentioning it is giving oxygen to it. So that's one of the main questions that were discussed and that we continue to discuss with our partners is, when should we cover a topic, especially when we have a big audience in terms of misinformation and disinformation.
Thank you very much. Very useful information. It's the tricky part, because we all have different practices, and sometimes it's you need to find a way to work together. But that is something we are fairly used to at CIRCOM. I could maybe give you a short answer about your question to the community. We haven't yet at CIRCOM worked on any collaborative fact-checking endeavor, but we do use, of course, the network to share best practices in terms of for example, covering the news and, on new outlets, and conquering new audiences in media forms that are not television or radio anymore. But fact-checking is a rather unexplored field for us as a network, but there is indeed very interesting possibilities lying ahead. Denis Teyssou joined us in the call. Good afternoon, Denis.
Hi, Guillaume.
Thank you for joining us in the webinar. And now for a more practical session, I asked Denis to come to talk to us about INVID, which is a widely used tool in the industry, a verification tool, which is an entirely free tool. Well, Denis, maybe you can share your screen and tell us how it works and what was the idea behind it, because you conceived it.
Okay, great. 1 second. I'm just to say hello. I'm at AFP, so I'm obliged to wear a mask, and I'm squatting somebody else's office. So,
thank you.
So I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Okay.
And while Denis is doing that, I'm going to send you a link in the chat to get your own copy of InVid, which comes in the form of mainly a browser extension, but there are other things.
Okay, so you should see my screen.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. So yes, so I'm going to talk. InVid, I mean the InVid verification plugin. We call it now InVid WeVerify. So it was started in a European project, H2020 Horizon 2020 European project called InVid for In Video Veritas, which lasted from 2017 and 2016 2018. And we have a new project called WeVerify for wider and enhanced verification for you. And in this new project, we are enhancing this verification plugin. Okay, so all the partners from WeVerify, we started in 3 previous European projects. There have been several European projects. FIM was about rumors, Reveal was already about verification on social networks, and InVid was strictly on video and images as well. And so we have this plugin. It is available on the Chrome store. It is also available for Firefox. It works in Opera as well. And that's a toolbox aimed to simplify life for journalists and fact checkers to verify information, and especially videos and images. Right now, we are at something like 33,000 users. And so we were at something like 20,000 in last January. So with the COVID crisis, it has increased a lot. And our users are mostly, I mean, journalists, fact checkers, human rights organizations who have the same kind of problematic of video and pictures verification, because all the human rights violations are documented now with images and videos. We have also media literacy scholars and civil society, for instance, civil protection, but when they need to send some rescue somewhere, they need to be sure that the image that they have seen on social networks is accurate and not a fake. So the plugin is used in 184 countries, and of course mostly in European countries also, but also a lot in the United States and in India, where there is a tremendous phenomenon of fakes and tensions with Pakistan, with Muslim communities and all that. Here are the top countries. I mean, that's not a very recent slide, but it shows a bit the dimensions. So widely again used in mostly in Europe, but also each time we have a new country with elections, for instance, where the polarized debate are propitious to fake news propagation, then we get more users from that country. It is daily used by our fact-checking team at AFP. So at AFP now we are fact-checking in something like 16 languages and more than 40 countries. And we have a team of some 90 people already doing only fact-checking, and mainly under a contract with Facebook, with a third-party fact-checking network organized by Facebook with different fact-checkers around the world. So that's one of the main tools which is used, especially for detecting fake videos and fake images. But it is also used by many other media. Here are 2 examples of fake content debunked by BBC, for example. But we have many other televisions, like Spanish television, RTVE. We have the RAI, for instance, or German televisions as well. Are using it, France 24 observers as well. So many teams and doing debunking, fact-checking, and social network activity are using those tools. The main tool that in terms of video verification, one of the main tools is the video fragmentation and reverse search image. What does it mean? It means that here I set up a recent example, which is the video which went viral on the end of August about Joe Biden getting asleep in an interview on a local television. In fact, it was a manipulation of image. It was something taken from a previous video and changing the sound as well. And so it was completely manipulated. So what do we do in those cases? We analyze the video, we calculate some keyframes for each sequence, each plan of the video, and the user just have to send those keyframes to reverse image search engines like Google, Yandex, the Russian search engine, which is very good, Bing from Microsoft, which is getting better as well, T9, which is the historical Canadian search engine. We have the Baidu, the Chinese search engine as well, and Karmadeke, which is a search engine indexing Reddit, the social US website. And when you query by images, those were search engines, they just give you back information they have when they have indexed those kind of keyframes or those videos. And here, for instance, you just get back the debunks because, I mean, it is already more than 1 week after. But you could also retrieve exactly the video, because here Biden is wearing a very special pocket here and a US pin, for instance, and it's very easy to find out the original video which was used for making the manipulation. And also to retrieve, for example, the channel from the local US TV channel that aired another video than the one which is supposed to be. So this is what we call video verification by similarity. And so this is historically as was working our verification plugin. And now we are going to bring more tools. So we have several tools to also to analyze the images to see whether they have been manipulated. And we are adding also some social network analysis. And we have also a couple of search engines, which are vertical search engine on the thematic of COVID-19. And another one, which is a cross network. So with the same keyword, the same hashtag, for instance, we can query it on a series of networks like Facebook, VK, the Russian Facebook, for instance, or YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and all this. In one go, we can go and check several kind of meta search to see whether some particular disinformation campaign is widespread in different type of networks. We are working very actively on different new features. One of them is what we call an assistant, a verification companion. The idea is that the more tools we put into the interface, more complex it is for end users, and especially for newbie users. And so we are trying to help and to guide the users to towards the tools that they can use for verifying an image or verifying a video, verifying something from YouTube in particular, or from Facebook or from Twitter, Instagram. And so we are trying to just to focus and to tell the user, okay, you can with your URL, what here is what you can do with our tool in terms of verification of images, videos, and even text. The second item that is it is integrated already is Twitter social network analysis. Here is the idea is to on a particular account or with some keywords or hashtags. So here, that's the example is about the hashtag pandemic. Just over a week until today. We see that this pandemic, it was viral in May. That's a video, a conspiracy video about the COVID pandemic. And here you can see in the week, we have a timeline with a different tweet and retweets. We have a bubble chart, for instance, of the top 100 most active accounts with different colors that show the activity of people and whether they are posting a lot. We have a neat map of tweet distribution that allows you to find out whether there could be some organized, coordinated behavior of different actors posting at the same time, or bots posting regularly at the same hour on the same day. So we have a series of graphic, of some kind of data journalism graphic, which are automated, that help the journalist and the fact checker to find out clues about some disinformation campaign, and to immediately see some kind of anomalies or some kind of weird behavior that will help them to debunk a disinformation campaign. We have also some graphs like this one, which is putting tracing connections between hashtags, URL, which are backing some disinformation campaign, but also the mentions, the users' mentions in the tweets, the retweets with comments, and the replies to certain tweets. And this allows, when you click on any of these nodes, you get all the tweets corresponding to that intersection, for instance, while the width of the edges between the nodes show the volume of tweets that carry both. For example, here, if you see at the middle, we have a pandemic hashtag, which is basically which is the query I made, with something in 1 week of more than 4,000 tweets. Then one of the main URL with more than 1,000 times was a Twitter URL, for instance. So you can see who is backing some disinformation campaign, who is backing some hashtag, who is pushing some kind of thematic on the social networks. And we have also some automated word cloud. So this is the word cloud corresponding to this almost 5,000 tweets on pandemic. So it shows all the keywords, the main keywords that are extracted from this corpus. And each keyword can be, is clickable. So you can see automatically just in one click, you can see all the tweets corresponding to some particular keyword. So we have some differences between accounts for like Donald Trump, which is mentioned a lot of times there, called for action against some particular, scandemic or whatever, that these kind of circles are using when talking about pandemic. So all this is automated. So the idea is just to democratize the social network analysis for journalists. You don't need to have, researchers or people spending hours and hours to try to find out what's going on in a big in a corpus. So we are more working on smaller corpus normally, just to find out when something is starting, for example, in disinformation campaign, who is backing this kind of campaign, what kind of vocabulary, what kind of hashtag they are using, and this kind of things. Then we are working on deepfake detection. So this is not completely fully integrated because we are qualifying our detector yet. We participated in a big challenge a few months ago organized by Facebook, and the team of WeVerify arrived in the top 30 or 35. So here is just an example. This is one of videos, trailer videos on YouTube. With a deepfake made of Brad Pitt face replacing Schwarzenegger in some Terminator movie, but pretty good quality. And we have this detector, which is not yet integrated because again we are working hardly on that to try to with many examples to find out whether it responds well and before releasing it to the public and to the fact checkers. And here we are doing what we are doing. In fact, is the same kind of techniques that we analyze the video by sequence. We extract the keyframes, and for each keyframe, we are going to calculate the probability of this frame to belong to some to be a deepfake, a manipulated video through artificial intelligence. So something which has been made automatically by a machine. And here, but in that example, for example, the system recognized that this face has been manipulated with a high level of probability. And so we're working on that and on neighboring keyframes as well to be able to detect deepfakes. So that's a bit of a technological race because the deepfakes are improving because of the new technologies. That makes that the quality of images is each time better. But we are running to try to find out and to be able to tackle most of the deepfakes which are currently outside. In terms of journalism and in terms of fact-checking, we didn't see that much deepfakes yet, but some examples have went live on the internet, on the web, in India, in Malaysia, in different Asian countries. So that's something that we know that at some point it would come. There are some examples, of course, of Barack Obama with Jordan Peele, the Oscarized documentarist, but this is more a warning video. There is another example in Belgium with Donald Trump video calling Belgian people to withdraw from the Paris climate agreement or these kind of things. But these were more made for kind of demonstration or some kind of joke. But still the technology allows, allows to make credible fake, and this is, it will be annoying at some point. So we are working actively on this topic. And another topic we are working also, which is not yet integrated, is a database of non-fakes. Here is a video which is available on YouTube. That's allegedly the leaked Osama bin Laden death photo. In fact, so that video you can see has been seen by 2.3 million people on YouTube since May 2011. And in fact, we know that, so when we query with our fragmentation, Google, for instance, so today there's another answer, which is Osama bin Laden leaked image. Here that's death photo real. So even Google is missing the clue here. And in fact, we know that because we have made, it was already debunked. So we know that this image is in fact a keyframe, a manipulated keyframe of Ridley Scott movie, the Black Hawk Down. And this image, those two images have something like more than 89% similarity. And so that we know this kind of thing, it has been published by some fact checker, which is Snopes in the States, for instance, and many years ago. And so the idea is that we are building a database of non-fakes to allow us to, to avoid the certain number of fakes to widespread, to propagate in other countries, in other languages, depicting a similar event, for instance. So here that's a specific issue about this American operation in Pakistan. But you have videos of violence, for instance, videos of racism or riots or whatever that come from one country and they reappear in another country with a different footage, different wording, and these kind of fakes are repeated. Are repeated during even sometimes many years. So we want to establish this database to be, to be able to very quickly tell the fact checkers, okay, this is those images, we know them. So we are implementing also a similarity search layer here. And the idea is just to say to the fact checkers, okay, this image, we know that it has been already used in a fake news situation in the past. And so that's where we are working on right now. And basically that's what I wanted to share with you. Just an InVid project, just doing WeVerify, we published also with some partners a video verification book at Springer, which is basically explaining all the plugin was created also, and all the kind of technology issues that we had to tackle to improve in terms of video verification. And basically, that's what I wanted to share with you. Of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you, Denis. Very impressive new features coming to WeVerify in the coming weeks, coming month. What would be the time frame, you'd say?
Which time? The current plugin, I would like to update it more or less in October, but with the Twitter social network analysis already, and for the rest, we depend on our results. The deepfake is progressing, but still we want to be sure. We don't want to release something that will have a false positive or could lead to some kind of definitive answer about the video, where it's quite complex. So we want to be sure that what we put into the hands of the end users is really working well.
Would you say that one needs to be an experienced fact checker in order to be able to use these tools, or could any journalist with some will have a go?
What we have seen is that our tool helps to democratize the fact checking. So the fact checking training, a lot of fact checking training are using the tools. And that's not that complicated. I mean, more or less everybody knows to do a reverse search on Chrome, for instance. It is built in on Google with just a right click, for instance. What we do is that we provide 6 search engines instead of only Google. And sometimes, of course, Google do the job, but sometimes it doesn't work in certain countries, for instance, or because the images have not been indexed. And then you can rely on another search engine, and each search engine bring back some different technologies or different progress. For instance, Bing is quite good for facial recognition, so for recognizing people. Yandex is very good also because of their coverage in notably in Middle East, for instance, is probably better than Google. So each one has a complementarity, and so we are using the big data indexes of the big search engines to help the fact checkers to verify. And so it may appear complex. Some features are complex, like forensic analysis, which is a kind of mathematical analysis of images to see whether those images have been tampered. Depending on the examples, depending on the sample, it could be very complex or very complicated to interpret. And we have some we submitted some other projects as well to work on this to help interpretation. But I would say that with our tool, it's much easier for fact checkers for journalists to start fact checking. And at AFP, that's the main tool we are using. And we have trained them mostly on our tool right now, because it eases the work very much. For example, before the video fragmentation that I showed before that, people had to take manually screenshots of a video, then upload manually those screenshots to Google to find out some results. But many people didn't use Yandex, for instance. They were using mostly only Google, and now they are using much more different search engines. So it empowers the users to do much more work in less time, in fact. So it improves the productivity and also the chances to get a good answer, because if you can query very rapidly several search engines, you will be better covered than if you rely only on one search engine.
So that's a very typical use case, isn't it? Because video is a very powerful means to convey fake news, or I know you don't like the word, or let's say dubious news. That's for Mary. And
disinformation, yeah.
Disinformation, thank you. But it means that quite often one journalist would find himself or herself checking if a video is used according to the description, because we would have like a video that hasn't been manipulated, but we've seen some case, for instance, where you had demonstrations in Africa that were used in an entirely other context. So that is something in one click that allows you to say, okay, that video allegedly is from 2020, but in reality is from 2016 in Nigeria and not at all in Cameroon, for instance.
Exactly. That's most of the fake counterfeit content that we see on the internet are basically decontextualized content. That means that there is an earthquake, somebody is taking an earthquake images from 3 years ago and just put it back in the loop. And the tool is very efficient for that. Just to try to find out through the similarity search indexes to find out whether those images are already known and belong to another situation, another news context than the one that some fakers are trying to promote.
Good. Thank you very much, Denis, for your time. Any questions, any more additional questions for Denis in the call?
Yes, I put my mic. Yes, I have a question for the two first speakers about the independence of your consortium and your financing. I see a lot of partners, the two consortium or group, and a lot of financing, such as European Union or Google or Facebook in your case. What's your approach for your independence and so your trustability? Thank you.
So maybe Mari, if you want to answer first, and then Denis.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, it's a question that we have frequently because we have a lot of finances from Google News Initiative for now. Google is one of the co-founders of First Draft, so in that sense, it's not that a big surprise that they would be financing the activity of First Draft nowadays. The question is more that for us, we want to keep the relationship going on with the platforms, because we also know that most of the problem that we have with online disinformation is actually happening on the platforms themselves. So for us, it's important for them to allow them to be part of the solution, as they know that they're also part of the problem. That doesn't mean that we follow them blindly wherever they go, it's not, yeah, we are financed by Google, but we are free to publish whatever we want in terms of how, for example, the platforms are reacting to the infodemic. That's also why, for example, for the CrossCheck platform, we are looking at making a paid entrance for the media organizations who are going to join us. We are also producing now some intelligence reports, thanks to our editorial team, for some agencies from the UN, which allows us like several sources of finance that would help us to be more independent from Google. But it's true that for us, for the moment, Google is our major financer.
Thank you. Denis, you had the flag of the EU on your slides.
Yes, because Invid and WeVerify are, I'm going to put the video, Invid and WeVerify are European project. That's H2020, Horizon 2020 framework. So we apply for our project, and if we are selected, then we get the funds. And so those two projects have been funded by the H2020 framework. But part of that, AFP is an independent organism with a law of 1957. We have a mission of general interest funded by the French state, and we have commercial clients as well for the information part. And again, on the fact checking, we are in a relationship with Facebook with this third-party fact-checking network. So
Does that
pretty transparent.
Does that mean that you have access to some Facebook data that others wouldn't have access to?
We would love to, but that's not that simple. We have access to CrowdTangle like most media companies. So CrowdTangle is this former startup which has been integrated into Facebook, and they are dealing with data from Facebook, Instagram, and we have a public extension as well. So we have access to CrowdTangle mainly. And of course, Facebook is providing also kind of dashboard of what they have flagged, mainly through artificial intelligence, as being suspicious content. And so, but our editors are free. I mean, they have the editorial freedom to pick up whatever they want.
So what you're saying is that they monitor what is dubious at the moment, and they give you a list or a feed of items
yes.
that they suggest should be verified first.
Exactly. And that's where our editors are picking.
Thank you. That's very impressive. I mean, both of you, there's one thing that I keep noting, especially having put quite some time into trying to study the African situation during the COVID pandemic, is private messaging that did not appear much in what we've seen. Are you both of the opinion that these WhatsApp, Telegram groups are Fort Knoxes that can't really be penetrated, or do you see some way for us journalists or fact checkers to find our way in and see what's circulating and combat misinformation there.
Denis, you want to go first? Or?
Okay. Many of our users in Africa or in India are using already the plugin for video verification on WhatsApp, for instance, because I mean they're just verifying the video file. So once you have it on WhatsApp, it's easy to download and then upload to indeed WeVerify to fragment this video and to see whether this video existed previously. And a lot of in many countries, in Spain, for instance, I think Maldito Bulo is doing that, also Maldita.es. And other channels have, I mean, many other fact checkers have also channels on WhatsApp to give the fact checking, so people can subscribe also to this to those fact check or to see whether those stories have been fact checked or not. And so there is ways to do things, but of course we are lacking, we're missing the context most of the time of the messages. So conspiracy theories or whatever on private group on WhatsApp, it may escape our fact checking. But most, I mean, people, when they are going outside or somebody is on some group, for instance, when we are aware. But again, in India, that's a very, very common that they are using our tools for fact checking videos on WhatsApp.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are also looking quite a lot at WhatsApp at the moment, but also other platforms like TikTok, for example, or Telegram, because we see that there are lots of sources of mis and disinformation who are actually migrating from the bigger platforms like Facebook or Twitter to some other channels which are possibly more difficult to investigate. We did some webinars about that, about how well the tools and techniques to explore them, but also the ethics and the standards that you should think about before exploring this kind of groups, especially when they are closed groups. What does define a private group when you can find the link in a public space, for example, as an invitation to the private group? Is it still a private group or not? All these conversations need to be had before entering those groups, as well as security measures in terms of, like, for example, burner phones and other security measures you should take before exploring that kind of groups. But from what I can see, people are using, like journalists and media organizations are using these groups in terms of investigation and social listening in certain ways, as much as they can, in the respect of these ethical considerations, but also, as Denis was saying, as a way to share the fact checks they are doing, but also as possible tip lines where they can actually get the feedback from the audiences on what people are seeing in their own WhatsApp groups, for example, and would like to share for investigations, as we did several times in the Comprova project, for example.
Thank you, but that means you have to get your way into the private group before you can look at anything, which is one of the concerns, and the other one being that you can't really see the volume or the importance of a piece of disinformation because you have no public data on that, as you would have a view counter on YouTube or Facebook, for instance. Great. So it's a small world, the fact-checking one, and I have to confess, one that I have discovered during the COVID-19 situation, and that's, I guess, my turn to talk about the experience we had during that pandemic, which is not over. I shouldn't use the past tense. Denis' mask is there to just remind us all, even though I'm in Finland, where we had like 350 deaths, so we feel like we're in some sort of a hiatus here, isolated from the worst of the situation. But long story short, what's happened during the pandemic was a really interesting social experiment in terms of journalism and fact-checking, and it was called Journalistes Solidaires, which is French for journalists holding hands, I would say. And it was an entirely decentralized fact-checking open newsroom that was built from nothing in about a month. And I think it would be interesting to share, because most of the people you're seeing there were journalists or are still journalists, and they had that spare time and they were locked into their apartments in Paris usually, or area, or in Brussels, and couldn't do much about the COVID situation and wanted to give some of their time to do some debunking and fact checking, but wouldn't know much about that. But there were journalists, so they had some idea about how to proceed to do some basic verification, but they soon would learn to use InVid and other tools and to see all the IFCN, International Fact-Checking Network tools and papers and go through that. But what they really lacked was one way to organize themselves. And when I say we, I mean France Info, which is one of the French continuous news channel, came into contact with them, and they asked me to have a look at that group and to see if we could organize and structure them so that a collaboration could come out of that. And that's what we've done, from a group of 15 people at the beginning to more than 150 at the end. They had a website, a Facebook page, a Twitter account where we would relay other people's work. So established fact-checking newsrooms or departments from existing media, we would just relay them, and we would have our own fact-checking. And that's on the map. I mean, I'm the odd part up north here, but the rest of it is pretty much concentrated into French-speaking countries. They were essentially from France and Belgium and some other parts of the world. So what we did is try to find a way to prove to the world that what we were writing about was legit and trustworthy, which was quite difficult to do because we were basically no one. A bunch of journalists with some background, but mostly young, a few managers, if you will, or people doing the coordination, being more experienced like myself, but no brands, no past. We were not AFP or First Draft. So we thought that one way for us to establish legitimacy is to come up with an open newsroom. So just to say everything we do is transparent. You can see before we publish the debunks all the steps that we are taking. So we designed a system during the lockdown where we had a database and everybody was using that database to store the debunks. And that is something that I think is one of the interesting developments we can take from that, and probably one of the paths that CrossCheck is taking. It's one system that allows for collaboration where you have group work, and each time you do something, you log it into the app, and it should be frictionless. It shouldn't be annoying to do. It should be easy to do, so that you could get all the steps that show to the readers of the public what you've been doing as a fact checker. And if you really want to see like the walls we hit, all the leads that were followed and did not lead to anything, and others that led to something successful, you could see it into a log of the inquiry. That's one of the ways to seek for trust. Another one is the way we could organize ourselves. So just to finish on that open newsroom aspect, everything was on the website in a separate section where we had that website with debunks, and you could see the log of everything there. The system itself, the way we organized, relied on self-checks, basically having people being into task forces. So that's one such task force when we would have one piece of information that was dubious. We didn't know if it was true or false. There was some doubt. Either someone from within the group would want to check it, or maybe a reader would want to check it and just sent us a URL saying, here's a link to something I find a bit strange. Can you please have a look? What we would do is use a task force where you would have two verificators, two fact checkers, and one coordinator. And that's the key thing in the process that we want to adapt to new systems, because we do firmly believe that working as groups, as task forces, is one way to, you know, keep check on the work. When you work in group, you have to explain to the other one what you're doing. You have to justify, maybe not justify yourself negatively, but just doing a fair bit of explaining so that everybody's on the same page. And that is something we all are journalists, and we all know that it's not typically the way we do work in journalism, which is more like, okay, I'm going to follow a lead. I, the journalist, will come to a conclusion. And when I come to a conclusion, I will submit that to an editor, and maybe we could have a conversation then, but the work would be mostly done, and it's going to be either a yes or no. The yes is publication, the no is go back to the drawing table and do something fresh or complement it. Here, the fact that you do work in groups is interesting, because you do build trust, because you have these self-checks, and you have one coordinator who does not need to be journalist, who can just ensure that the methodology is followed. And that's the third pillar, really, of the system that was born from nothing, which was, okay, how do we do stuff? How do we, step by step, decide that we're going to verify that piece of information? And we didn't invent anything. I mean, people like First Draft or ODI-FCM before us, or other organizations, have clearly defined what it means or what it takes to verify something. And it's very logical. And it's sometimes a bit boring, and, you know, it's studious. It's always like, it's almost like a programmer's job, when, okay, that works, that doesn't work, let's try that. Okay, it doesn't work, let's try something else. It's not always as instinctive as the rest of journalism work usually occurs. So the fact to share all that in a group, and to have a coordinator in the middle that would ensure that people wouldn't go you know, on a too long sidetrack, wouldn't lose time, wouldn't follow a lead that clearly wasn't worth it. That helped into us defining the system. And then we would come into a conclusion. And that conclusion usually, well, it was submitted to other verification techniques by rereaders and other people that would then confirm that it was semantically okay, that the logic followed in the fact check was interesting. But that core team, if you will, which is the task force, is really the signature of that adventure, and that is what enabled us to gain trust during the COVID time. So what we ended up doing is having more than 190 fact checks during 3 months, revolving around COVID-19. And most of those would come from readers of the Facebook page or reader of the website. They would send us a piece of information, and we would apply that methodology and technique. And quite often, in a matter of, well, sometimes within the same day, sometimes it would take us 2 weeks, but quite rapidly we would come to a conclusion and have a thorough, documented, open process showing the world how we work, because we were nobodies and we just needed to say, okay, everything's here, and that's how you can assess that we did our work properly. So that method, I feel, is something that can be an inspiration for newsrooms that want to dip a toe into the fact-checking world, because one of the benefits of that method is that you don't need to build a team of fact-checkers. You can have some of your people, some of your journalists for some hours in the week that could give time and work within a group on one story, and they would get the results from that fact-check without needing to be involved into the rest of the stories being, you know, worked on in the group. So that methodology is something that we are trying to transform into a platform. And some of us, from the success of Journalistes Solidaires, have tried to create a tool, a platform, which would give you access to many of the tools that we heard about today, but also a system that allows you to log everything you do easily and allows you, if you will, to lend a journalist for some time. They would be taken into the system and supported by coordinators and a whole team of experienced fact checkers or just colleagues, and would achieve like a fact check, would learn about fact checking, and hopefully would want to do more within the platform. So during Journalist Solidaire, what we've been doing, we've been using tools that were given for us to us for free by big, usually American names. We would use Airtable, which is a database system, Telegram, you all know the messaging system, and Discord, which was a gamer's piece of software that is becoming more and more in social network now. And what we would do is just, try to stitch these tools together to build a coherent system. And in the end, we just decided, okay, let's create a software company and become independent from all these guys, because we couldn't afford to use these tools if they decided to charge for us, because they were kind enough to let us use these free of charge during the pandemic. But all of a sudden they can decide, okay, that's now the normal price, and the normal price would have been more than 3,000 euros per month for the size of that group. And that wouldn't, we wouldn't have the means to do that. So we decided to build a company and try to sustain that, providing that tool to Journalist Solidaire, of course, so that they can continue. They would create a non-profit on their side. We would work with universities also that were really interested into getting structured data from all of that. And that is also something that might be of interest to you, is we've talked about new misinformation dissemination and the ways to fight it. We think there's one step after that, which is to better understand how they are produced and to try to tackle them before they get viral. So one illustration of that is usually when we get notice about a piece of disinformation, that's usually 1 or 2 weeks after it was published. So except for big things like Trump, involving Trump usually, but it takes some time for a piece of misinformation to get viral, to get the ball rolling, if you will. And it takes up to 2-3 weeks to have some real damage. What if we could develop machines based on knowledge? They could detect these dubious news. We don't want to develop a machine that says that's true, that's false. We think that's not possible at the moment. Maybe it'll be in the future, but we don't think it's possible at the moment. And what if we train an AI to identify possible pieces of misinformation for human people to debunk quickly? So rather than wait 2 weeks for a piece of fake news to do its damage, what if we try to detect it and kill it before it does damage? And one way to do that is to give data to researchers. We've been in contact with many universities in England, in Belgium, in France, in Germany, in Sweden, that's heard the word about our project, and they asked us about our data. Can we get your structured data? Our goal is to try to find a way to collect more debunking data. So that means human beings documenting why such a piece of information is false, and feeding that to the universities and the researchers, so that they can develop, we don't know what, they don't know what, but they can develop tools and strategies to fight disinformation in the future. So that's a big goal and a project that could be worked on in CIRCOM. It requires to stitch together, and that's where I can hear First Draft Spain when they were talking about collaboration standards. How do you stitch together several newsrooms? And we are, even worse, introducing citizens, just regular people, not journalists, that could help also into detecting the fake news or the disinformation, and maybe help fighting them, being, you know, in that frame of the methodology we have. So CheckFirst is the name of the company and the initiative that came from the Journalist Solidaire experience, and we think it's going to be interesting to maybe dip a toe into that also, because we could have, as a team effort, one way to better assume our public service mission, basically, and at the same time train our journalists to be more, you know, willing maybe to be doubtful about some pieces of news. Roman, you opened the session by saying maybe we publish a bit too soon. Maybe we don't verify enough before we do relay something, because we have that old agency reflex in newsrooms where we had trusted sources, AFP being one, Reuters being another one, AP being a third one. You had that feed, and everything that came into the newsroom was to be trusted. And now we have like also feeds, but they come from different sources, like social media and other things. And I'm not saying that we are blindly relaying everything, but sometimes we need to check a little bit more what we do publish. So collaboration obviously is one word we should all aim at in the coming month and years. And it's going to be tricky, but I think there's something quite interesting to do with First Draft, with CheckFirst, using AFP tools and others, and maybe with the IFCN also, because there's no competition in that area. I mean, we all are aiming at the same goal, which is to try to fight a very strange and shady monster that we don't really know what it is and who's manipulating it. So let's try to gather more data to get a little clearer picture about that. That would be the goal and the aim of CheckFirst, and I think CIRCOM ultimately. Anyhow, thank you for your patience. We know it's a long time to be before the computer listening to people babble on concepts, but hopefully you got some value from that. I'm really grateful again that Mary could take some time to prepare the presentation for us, and Denis had to leave for another meeting. See you soon, hopefully in person someday, maybe again, and if not, yeah, we have all the tools to send us various messages. Thank you.